On today's show, the Dallas Mavericks win total over-under is set at 50.5. Is that disrespectful? Yeah, kind of. I'll tell you why in today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
You are Locked On Mavs.
Great, Rusty.
Your daily Dallas Mavericks podcast.
No one's dying.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Amazing.
Your team every day.
Still can't eat milk.
And welcome. You're locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team back to every day. Thanks for being part of the show and making Locked On Mavs your first listen today, where the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day on any podcast platform. Leave a 5-star review wherever you are. Like the video on YouTube. Comment anything below. Give me an over-under. Just respond over or under to 50.5 wins for the Dallas Mavericks next season. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And joining me from 105.3 The Fan, the consummate professional. What you got for me, Reggie Adetula?
It's hilarious that you always call me the consummate professional, because you know what I got? Nothing. Let's talk about the soups.
That is not true. You'll say you have nothing. You'll say you have nothing, and then by the end of the show, I'll be like, man, Reg's so good. Reg's always got something. He's always bringing something to the table. We'll talk about the Mavs over under. Fanduel set it at 50.5. They released that last week, and we'll talk about why it's set at that. Is it disrespectful? We'll talk about how the Mavericks beat that 50.5. How do they get more than 50 wins, which is the exact same number of wins they got last year? So we'll talk about that. We'll get into all that. But I just want to say thanks to everybody for tuning in last week, and I'm back from vacation. I was hanging out with my family in Cincinnati, in the Queen City that they call it. I don't know why it's the Queen City, and then there are also other Queen cities too.
Yeah, like Charlotte is Queen City.
Yeah, Charlotte is the Queen City. There's two queens, I guess.
All the queens, I guess.
It's a Mormon country, apparently. So.
Okay, very good.
And so I'm back now. We'll be back for the rest of the summer. We'll continuing on. Media Day is set for September 30th, and so we should be really ramping up through then. Have some good stuff planned for the show. And hey, you know where to go for Dallas Mavericks show. I noticed that while I was gone, nobody posted an episode. No other Mavericks podcast posted an episode from when I was gone to now when I'm back. So hey, you want Dallas Mavericks content? You actually have no other choice right now. So
okay, I wouldn't necessarily put it that way, but technically correct.
All right, let's talk about the FanDuel over-under. It's set at 50.5.
Okay.
To me, it's coming off a little disrespectful, and I understand why they're set this way. They always want you to lower your expectations. They want people to choose both sides. They want the haters to take the under and to say, no, there's no way they'll hit 50 wins again. Last year was an aberration. This team is not that good. Look what they did in the finals. And they want the fans and people to be up in arms about how it's too low and take the over. They want people to choose both sides. But to me, if you look at a team like the Dallas Mavericks, they win 50 last year. They didn't have Kyrie for a little bit of time. They get these two guys at the trade deadline. Their team completely changes. Now they bring those guys into next season. They bring in Klay. They bring in some of these other guys. They didn't really lose that much Vegas-wise, right? Like Derrick Jones Jr. is not moving the line in Vegas. Sorry. Like he was an important player last year, but he's not moving the line in Vegas. And so now it's set at the exact same of last year. What their wins. They won 50 last year, and now it's set to 50.5. So,
yeah.
Reg, are you vibing with me that this is a disrespectful line, at least to me?
I get where you're coming from on the disrespect. I don't know how disrespectful it actually is. And this might just be my natural reaction of being a little bit of a contrarian. I've tried to work on myself in that way.
I told you you're going to have
something. I recognize it comes out. Hey, man, 50 wins is a good season, right? Like, just objectively, I think that 50 wins is the marker that we typically utilize to go, all right, did you have a good season? And the one thing that I'm not going to get past, right? We definitely saw that you added to this team, particularly you added like an element to this team with Klay Thompson, and you add shooting. One of the things that you also added is another dude who can be qualified as hurt guy, right? Injuries, I think, ends up being a big question when it comes to this team and their capability of being good in a regular season context. You have Kyrie Irving, who can be reasonably qualified as hurt guy. Klay Thompson, who can be hurt guy. And those are two of your most, I think, like, of your three most important players when we talk about what's happening here, with all due respect to the likes of Derek Lively II and PJ Washington. Like, I think injuries is where you get to an interesting place, in addition to the idea that I don't think that your foundation of your roster is changing a ton from the end of the season to this year, but I think there is some figuring out to be done. So I think with all of those things considered, if you leave some wiggle room for the potential of injuries making this a little bit tougher, and I understand you had injuries last season, I'm not trying to neglect that, but that and the idea that maybe there's going to be some instances where it's a little tough, plus the fact that the West, again, ends up being an issue, even though I believe you to be one of the better, if not the best teams in the West, you're still going to have to play these games, and you're still going to have instances where you lose against teams that maybe you shouldn't have, right, in those types of situations. And I think all things considered, coming up on a side where you go, yeah, man, about 50 games, maybe give or take a few, I don't think is entirely unfair in that way.
It's, to me, you look at what this team was the last 3 months of last season, and you kind of hope that they go into next season with that momentum already. Yes, they have to add a couple pieces, but we think that the Klay Thompson piece is going to be pretty easy to add. He's pretty plug and play with the way that he's going to play, especially on offense, but defensively that may take a little bit of time. But they've got bigs they haven't had. I mean, at the beginning of last season, it was a rookie Derek Lively going into the season, and we were going, okay, well, if he's the answer. If he doesn't work, then we don't know what they do. They go back to Dwight and Maxey again and try that. Now you have 48 minutes of Gafford, who was looking pretty good the other day against Chet in a run. Did you see that? He blocked him twice, and he got the alley-oop on the other end. And we're in full on workout.
We're in workout season.
Oh, we are full on it. It is no vowels. SZN season. Like we're full in it. And so, but now you have 48 minutes of that. You've got wings too. You bring in Najee Marshall. You got Quentin Grimes. You got I feel like this team has what they need for the first time in the Luka era going into the season. And so, but the other thing about just the way the Vegas numbers look is like Oklahoma City is set at 56.5. We think they got better too, right? They had 50, they won 57 games last year. So it's like, okay, is it that disrespectful to them? Minnesota didn't change at all. Like what they lose Kyle Anderson, they bring in Rob Dillingham, and they won 56 games last year. They're set at 52.5. It is kind of the nature of these over-unders, because they want you to take the over or the under. Like they want a bunch of people, they want a bunch of Mavs fans get up in arms with it and say, all right, we'll take the over that at 50.5.
I think they're also, like, one of the things that I think about a lot with the NBA is the way that we've kind of inflated win totals at the top because of the nature of the number of teams that race to the bottom. Like there's certain teams that maybe would be a 20-win team that is now a 14-win team because they are just that damn bad, and they're unceremoniously and shamelessly aiming towards being just atrocious, right?
Like if there was 6 generational talents in this upcoming draft, like
right. And I don't know necessarily. I think that you might have fewer of those teams that are as shamelessly aiming for the bottom. At the very least, you look at some of the teams that were at the bottom this year, and let's just go into the West, right? The likes of San Antonio, I think, is going to be a team that finds some more wins. Not necessarily that they're going to be incredible, but I think you understand what I'm talking about there. Memphis is a team that was bad, but they were dealing with an unreasonable rash of injuries. Utah, whatever the hell that is, right? But it's going to be in that nebulous space in the middle as well, right? Like that's the bottom there, right? In the East, I don't know what I can tell you about the Pistons or the Wizards. That's just going to be what it is. Charlotte as
Pistons
well.
have Tim Hardaway Jr. playing in Detroit every game, so he's apparently
that's good for like 2 more. That's good for like 2 more.
He's going to be an all-star. He plays in Detroit every game.
My case is going to be a little bit harder to make in the West, or in the East rather. But the idea, just there might be a few fewer teams that are like just hemorrhaging some of those wins that tend to go to a little bit more of a neutral season. And so maybe at the top of this, you don't have as inflated numbers, and not saying not any level of like demerit to those teams, because obviously you are still a good team at that top place. But maybe that also factors in. You look at the possibility of a little bit more of a neutral landscape that way.
You weren't moved by Alex Sarr's summer league play, going like 0-15 in that one game for the Wizards?
Buddy, I'm gonna be completely honest. I keep my summer league watching to a minimum, but even hearing and reading about some of the things that Alex Sarr was doing out there, baby, I am the opposite of excited. He gonna have to prove it to me. He gonna have to come out here, and I'm gonna have to have one of those, oh, that boy nice moments watching him, because at this point, I am expecting him to be. This is a family show, right? Cheeks.
We could say cheeks. Cheeks is acceptable.
Excellent. At least at the very beginning, I understand development those types of things.
Reggie baby mention on the show. Coming up, how do the Mavericks get more than 50 wins? They got 50 wins last year. How do they get more? What's the path? We'll talk about that and more coming up.
You don't believe you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Game Time. I was in Cincinnati this week, and I went to a Cincinnati Reds game with my family. I used Game Time. It was super easy, and I loved that it was cheaper than if I just bought it through the actual Reds website or another ticketing app or something like that. You can save on priority last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports like I did, concerts, comedy, theater like I did back in the winter to go see a show at Fair Park, all kinds of flash deals, zone deals, and the all-in pricing. I love this because when you get to a ticketing app and you get to the end, okay, I'm buying these tickets, $50 each. It's, 2 tickets should be $100. And you get to the end and you're like, it's $440. And you're just like, how? Why? You see it at the beginning when you hit the all-in pricing. I love that on Game Time. It's awesome. It takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets, all other kind of tickets as well. Download that Game Time app, create an account, use that code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Locked On NBA is the code, LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks everybody for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, part of the Raccoon Squad, listening every day. Some of you probably didn't even know I was gone, which I guess is fine. Not gonna hurt my feelings. If you want to support the show, text me, get text alerts from me on all kinds of Mavs stuff. Even while I was gone, the Mavs went and got Kessler Edwards, and so I sent a text to everybody about that and all kinds of things like that. They also signed Jamarian Sharp, and so I sent text to that. Subscribe to the subtext. Text it 214-643-8637 or click the link in the description wherever you're listening to the show. All right, Reg. 50.5. I think it's a little disrespectful, sort of the nature of the game when it comes to Vegas, but the Mavs won 50 games last year. How do they get more? How do they beat the over-under? Where can Dallas find one more win? And there's a very, very obvious answer. Where do the Mavericks find one more win?
I'm interested. Now, this is the problem here. I had a few things and I'm like, all right, these are obvious, but when you say that there's something very obvious, now I'm like,
the most obvious. The most obvious.
Well, for one, my thought is hey, be less injured. That's one of the. Obviously,
it's fair. I have that in a couple different ways, but that's not the most obvious one. I want everyone listening at home too to what's
I'm
the most
so
obvious
mad.
way? Yeah, you are.
I'm not gonna get this right. I've already
furious
resigned myself
with me.
to the fact that I'm not gonna get this right. All right, just tell me because
they threw the last 2 games of the season.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They threw the last 2 games. They can find 2 more. They can find another win there if they're in there. So that could get them to another level. They could have had more than 50 wins last year if they didn't need them. But that's
Again, for some reason my dumb brain was not going to get there. So I appreciate you just giving me an
only my Mavs pilled brain would go there.
But that's why we come to you for this, Nick, because your brain has been in fact Mavs pilled.
That's where I am. Dallas is also 11-15 in 26 games from December 14th to February 3rd. That's when Kyrie missed a bunch of games.
Yep.
And Kyrie missed 16 of those 26 games. Luka actually missed 7 of those games. Lively missed 6 games. And now let's start with this with injuries. Are they better prepared to handle injuries like that? Kyrie misses 16 of 26 games. Now you have Spencer Dinwiddie. You have depth. You have somebody to step in. A Spencer Dinwiddie, a Klay Thompson to come in and handle some of that load. Because during that stretch, that was the Dante Exum stretch where we all kind of agreed, Dante Exum is the one really taking over and he's been very good and helped them through that time to even just stay afloat at 11-15.
Yeah, man. By the way, if you are just listening and not viewing this on YouTube, I understand your life works in different ways. Maybe the audio version works for you. Watching this on YouTube is useful because Nick will throw up that depth chart, which is gorgeous when you need it. But yes, they have absolutely
looking good.
Kind of put themselves in a better place with this, right? I like to call Jaden Hardy the Kyrie Irving light, right? That ends up being a little bit of insurance, especially when you saw
how light can you get?
He played with. All right, okay. Let's be nice. But Jaden Hardy, you could, with the level of confidence that he played with, in the postseason, it gives me a little bit of good feelings that he can come in and give you some level of facsimile. In addition to, as you mentioned, Spencer Dinwiddie's a dude who can get his own shot, that is comfortable creating. We've seen him do that in the context of this team. Like, those things are great. In addition to that, right, we talk about the trade deadline and the things that brought. Also, it brought you a level of comfort as to where you were not having to put Dwight Powell onto the floor in major minutes if things happen at the center position, right? And during that time period you're talking about, like, you did not have this particular ability of having that rotation at the center position, and now you will have that for the entirety of the season. I think that gives you a little bit of flexibility there. Just speaking again to the idea that at any given position, you have somebody that you feel comfortable, probably on two levels, that if I need to start this person for a short period of time, that you'll be all right. Like, it does not feel like there's a glaring hole in what you're doing here.
For one, we are not going to badmouth the starting center of the Canada Olympic basketball team.
He's absolutely that. You know what he is? He is yet another instance of NBA role player playing great when that country badge is placed on their chest. I don't know what it is, but shout out to him for that.
Shout out to Dwight Powell. Shout out to Canada doing all that.
That's right.
I think this team is much better prepared to handle those absences in some way. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I was so in on Spencer Dinwiddie to be that last guy instead of a Dennis Smith Jr. or someone else, because they just need somebody else to step in and, hey, can you score 20 tonight? Is it possible for you to score 20 in an NBA game? And if the answer is closer to yes, then I think they needed that guy. And so Spencer Dinwiddie can help that. Dante Exum hopefully can help that even after his playoff performance this past year. Like, I think PJ Washington can help that and step in a little bit more. One thing that I hope from PJ Washington is that he does step into a little bit bigger of a role. We started to see that in the Oklahoma City Thunder series, that he can do a little bit more with the ball. He can post up. He has run a pick and roll in the past. Like, I think he'll have some opportunities to do that when Luka and Kyrie miss games, because they will. That's just the nature of those two guys. And so I think they're much better equipped to handle those stretches that we mentioned. And that's one way that they beat the 50 and a half and get over. Lively played 55 games last season. Before the trades, the Mavs, when Lively was playing, were 22-14. That's a 50-win pace. They were already at their pace, like their season pace, before the trades even happened, before they got Gafford, before they got PJ Washington, just with Lively. And Lively's injuries were not like these, oh my gosh, he's so injury prone. They're all get hit in the face and broken his nose in 3 places.
And to be fair, right, I said the Kyrie hurt guy thing. Like, obviously there's a long track of his career, but then also the majority of the time that he missed last year was another one of those kind of freak injuries along that line.
Yeah. So Lively playing 55 games last year. You hope that a full off season of rest and recovery and, more strength training and all that will help him to play more games next season. And if he plays more games, I think you find a couple of more wins there too with Lively.
Right. I think absolutely that is the case. Right. And I don't want to belabor the point, because we both agree that the idea that development is not necessarily linear, so you don't know exactly what you're getting. But I would be fair taking the gamble on the idea that Derek Lively II is an even better player this season. And that is a scary proposition, because you saw the level of player that he was able to be. And we saw that development happen pretty quickly. So you're not going to have the early rookie portion of the season of Derek Lively. You're going to have, at the very least, some level of that second half of the season, Derek Lively or better, I imagine. And so that also is going to be incredibly helpful, not just when it comes to the way that he plays and, the rim running those, but also the defense and the odd level of maturity, right? That he has, especially when it comes to bringing together that defense, being a glue guy for that particular purpose, right? Those types of things I imagine are very helpful. In addition to the idea that I also think that, hey man, you're not going to lose entire dimensions of your team for periods of stretches. And I think, well, at least I imagine that you will not. And with that dimension, that the one that immediately comes to mind is the ability to knock down shots, right? That dimension is not going to just fall off a cliff because you're bringing dudes that particularly have that as their skill set of focus, right? Their specialization in Klay Thompson was the name that I completely lost. Klay Thompson, the biggest free agent move, or biggest move of the offseason.
Still can't leave me open.
That's right. And for some reason, your name left my brain for an entirety of 5 seconds. But there you go. Klay Thompson, a specialization in that way. I think we all believe Najee Marshall was going to be a little bit more consistent shooting threes than you had with Derek. And so, like, I think that the idea that you're not going to have that 3-point threat fall off the table in the ways that it did sometimes, and I imagine that that's going to make you a little bit more insulated from some of the instances, some of the problems that you had at times during the course of that season. You might be able to eke out or stretch out a few more wins because of that.
It's an excellent point about the not losing your whole identity when somebody goes down. And I think that's especially true with Derek Lively. Like, as soon as he went down before the trades happened, all of a sudden you didn't have a traditional center to like take his spot and to do the things in, like, to run the pick and roll the same way. You're running with Maxey, who's just a fundamentally different type of center, or Dwight Powell, fundamentally different type of center, and just didn't have the same kind of, doesn't have the same kind of bounce he had pre like, Achilles injury. And so then you're like, all right, well, we can't run the same sorts of plays and things that we could with Derek Lively or with Daniel Gafford when he showed up. So that's a really great point. Coming up, a couple other reasons why the Mavs could beat the 50 over, like the over, and then maybe we'll talk about how it could happen if they go under.
Oh,
because it's possible. It's possible.
I guess.
It's possible. Talk about all that and more coming up.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has you covered with everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance with superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, you'll always find exactly what you need and exactly what you're looking for, because they have over 122 million different parts to choose from on your number one ride or die. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, you know that any one of those 122 million parts is going to be the exact fit for your car every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're running rubber and not cash. So all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die live at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
That's it. It's me versus the machines. The Matrix is taking over. That's it. They want us to be perfect. Basketball isn't perfect. It's beautiful.
That's it. It's me versus the machines, Reg.
That one never gets old.
That drop is the.
That's it. It's me versus the machines. The Matrix is taking over.
Just gonna keep giving. Every time he has a good game next season. Every time he has a good game next season, I'm starting with that.
That's it. It's me versus the machines.
Just keeps on giving. We're talking about the Mavs over under at 50.5 set by Fanduel. The ways the Mavs will beat it is, one of them is they threw 2 games last season. One of them is Derek Lively's health and the health of the team in general. We think they're better, more insulated to withstand some of those injuries in certain ways. Last year with Kyrie's health, this is one where it could go either way with Kyrie Irving. We've seen him miss less games. We've seen him play more games. The Mavericks were 39-19 in Kyrie's 58 games last season. That's a 55 win pace when Kyrie played for the whole season, not even just the end of the season when they were going on a run. So that's interesting if you want to just look at another way that they beat their 50.5. With Luka's health, they were 46-24 in Luka's 70 games. That's a 54 win pace. So obviously Luka's health is paramount and pivotal to all this.
Sure.
And also, another thing with Luka, how many games did he play injured during last season? I mean, we talk about the playoffs and talk about how he played injured through the whole playoffs. Through the season, he was injured too.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why when we got to the playoffs, we were like, yeah, it'll be all right. Like, we know he's hurting, but we've seen him do this for an extended period of time of being hurt, and not saying that he is the boy who cried wolf, just we know that he's thugging it out, right? And so he will continue to do so when the stakes get higher. But yes, absolutely played a lot of those games with a nick or bruise or both over the course of the season.
You went from nursery rhyme reference to like thugging it out.
That's what you get.
The consummate professional, just covering all spectrums and demos right there.
That's right.
It's just Reggie. My other question about beating the 50.5, how much better does Klay, Najee, Grimes, Dinwiddie, and how much do those upgrades make Dallas better than what they were before?
Oh, the idea of like your non-star minutes just not being as...
You're bringing in Klay, Najee, Grimes, and Dinwiddie to replace Tim Hardaway Jr., Josh Green, Derek Jones Jr. Like that's what you're basically bringing those guys in to replace. I mean there's an upgrade right there, and that could be worth a win or two.
For sure. Yeah, like I mean there was absolutely instances where the rotation of Kyrie and Luka was just so we had to watch it so closely because the minutes that were outside of it, I know vividly sitting next to you quite a few times that you started the tracker on, all right, what's the run looking like in non-Luka or non-Kyrie minutes,
Oof.
right? Like being able to not have that particular level of, I don't know if anxiety is the right word with minutes of them being off the floor. I imagine that'd be very helpful in some ways. And then also making it so that they're not having to do so much of carrying when it comes to, we have to go and get what we already had back because of the minutes off the floor. So yeah, no, that definitely would be helpful. I do wonder also, like, how much do we look at Jason Kidd having an idea and a blueprint of what this team should look like as opposed to going and searching? Or maybe that's just Jason. Maybe, look, that's part of it. I don't know if that's just Jason Kidd, like in a season, is he's going to be searching regardless to see what the iteration of this team this year is. But I imagine in year, 4, right? He has some level of ideas of what this looks like, especially with most of the pieces having been ones that he's worked with before. And maybe you're not starting from square one. Maybe you're starting a little bit further down on the process on finding what the identity of this team is earlier on and knowing what the buttons are to push.
I'm not playing. I'm watching, just like you guys.
That was the button that I pushed. That was the button.
Yep.
That's the button. That was my very next thing is, like, how long does it take to gel? And does Jason Kidd experiment early? Because there is going to be some experimentation. You know, there is some thought that, all right, is it Exum versus Dinwiddie versus Hardy for like backup guard minutes? And like, who's the odd man out there? Because there is going to be an odd man out. You look at this depth chart and like, you just see that, I mean, there's not enough minutes to go around for 15 guys necessarily. So you think, all right, well, AJ Lawson, Omax Prosper, probably Dwight Powell are on their way out. All right, then that also leaves like Exum and Hardy. They're not going to have a 12-man rotation. Most teams only have like a 10-man rotation. So like 2 guys are probably going to be out from this group. And it's just interesting to try and think through that. And so what does Jason Kidd do, and how does he deal with that early, like you mentioned? Does he experiment? Does he try things? Does he try something where we just go, like, we're just racking our brains, like JaVale McGee starting the season, and we go, all right, this was supposed to work. We thought this was going to work, and then all of a sudden, like 8 games in, it doesn't work. And we've seen him bail on some stuff pretty early, but 8 games is it's like what, 10% of the season basically. And so, we'll see what Jason Kidd decides to do, and that could affect over under in either way.
It absolutely could, but I would actually go ahead and like already posit the idea that I would be willing to give up the 1 or 2 wins that you might need in allowing him to fully kind of experiment in those ways. Because I think that having those ideas and knowing what you're doing, especially in the situation the Mavs find themselves in, right? Like this is almost akin to a few years back with Budenholzer with the Bucks, when we were like, we don't give a damn how many wins you get. You've got to figure out how to win in the postseason. Like that was the general NBA consensus. And so nothing that they did in the regular season really mattered, but you could see them trying to figure, okay, what are the answers for when we get to the real test for the team, which is the postseason. And the Mavs are kind of in that place, even though I don't think it's in as negative of a way as that example. But the regular season doesn't matter nearly as much for these Mavericks as, are you going to put yourself in the position to win that championship? And so the idea that Jason Kidd has tried some things out in the regular season that maybe looked wonky in the regular season that gives you some answers that you can use when it really matters in the postseason, I'm okay with that trade-off for the idea that, oh man, we were a game or 2 below what we ultimately could have gotten when it comes to over-under on the entirety of the season.
I'll go the opposite way. I think they should take the regular season more seriously and kind of do what the Nuggets did last year in that they decided to take the regular season a little bit more seriously so that you don't have to start the playoffs on the road against the Clippers, right? And then have to play the 1 seed in the second round. Yes, you got to avoid Denver. That ended up being really good for the Mavericks overall, but having to play the 1 seed in the second round, then having to go play the Timberwolves in the Western Conference Final, like, I think that the Mavs could take it more seriously. My last one was going to be, will the Mavs be motivated, be better in the regular season to prove that it wasn't just a fluke that they made the finals, to prove that, hey, we're a team? Or will they be the hunted team, and then all of a sudden they can't get away with certain games that they would have in a normal season? So I'm interested to see how that will go. It could go the way you said too, where they are like, hey, we'll just as long as we get to the playoffs, as long as we get to the playoffs fine and healthy, maybe they'll sit Luka more. Maybe they'll rest Luka more and do load management for him this season to try and make him ready in that way. And Kyrie, maybe they'll do that with him too. So there's all kinds of things going up and down on this. And that's why it's very hard to bet and to win money in Vegas, right? They set these numbers at really good marks, even if it does look disrespectful because it's lower than what we all expect it should be.
And I do think there's a happy medium between what we're talking about of like,
is it
making
50
sure
and a half?
You know what? I think it is. I think that's exactly it. No, I do think there's a happy medium between making sure that you figure some things out, but then also taking it seriously. And I do hope that Jason Kidd and company figure out what that line is and make sure to hang right on it.
In all these things we're talking about, are you feeling more confident in the Mavs or less in some of these areas?
I feel like just overall there's a level of more confidence, and some of that is like the way that you finished the season imbues this with confidence, and then the way that you got better in the offseason imbues you with confidence. And for the time being, I'm going to continue on those general vibes until proven otherwise. Like, I don't even personally know. I have my questions, but again, I think those are questions that come from healthy skepticism more than the idea that I see giant weaknesses that need to be pointed out. So I'm generally in a place where I'm like, look, this is a team that played well above my expectations also, right? So I have a level of skepticism on my expectations as opposed to like what this team is capable of doing. So yeah, no, I'm generally just in a fairly confident place with these Dallas Mavericks.
That was kind of my point, is that it feels like they're coming in the strongest that we've seen them in since I've covered the team, but probably definitely in the Luka era. That we feel the best about this Mavericks team going into a season, because usually it's like, all right, they made the Western Conference Finals, but then they lose Jalen Brunson. Or okay, now like they just missed the postseason. Now I feel really bad about the entire team, right?
Yeah, right.
And so, or going into a season, it's Porzingis is injured again, or it's his first healthy offseason in a long time, so we still have a huge question mark there. That was a big one. But this is the strongest they've been going into. They should beat that 50 and a half, and those are some of the ways that we just talked about, ways that they could beat it. Go listen to Reggie on 105.3 The Fan. Guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs. We'll be back tomorrow. Slightly and I will be talking about the over-unders for the rest of the NBA. Which team is overrated? Which team should not be above the Mavericks? Talk about that tomorrow. Peace out. Boom.